My name is Viha Verma, and I'm a career mentor with Educis World. I deal with college applications for the United States, the UK, India, Singapore, Australia, and Canada, right? As well as the rest of Europe, wherever necessary. So today I'm going to be taking you through the US activity list, which is, in my opinion, possibly one of the most underrated parts of the US application that can make a really big difference to whether or not you actually get the university of your dreams, right? Now, throughout this entire session, I'm going to be sharing some tips and tricks to crack the list and how best to write it or approach it. If anything I say confuses you, or if you have any contradictory opinions, please feel free to share them. Feel free to ask questions at any point. However, if you have any questions that do not directly pertain to the information being shared, please reserve them till the end of the session. Okay, just to begin with, may I get an understanding of what kind of grades you all are in, whether you're in grade 12, grade 11, whether you're a parent here for your child. Can I just get an understanding of who all we actually have attending this webinar? So if you could just drop that in the chat, that would be super helpful. 12th grade, 9th grade, excellent, starting super, super young, which I think is exactly the right age to be starting. Grade 10, grade 12, a lot of 11th graders, the perfect time to be tuning in, right? Okay, fabulous. So I'm guessing you're going to have a lot of questions throughout, so please just feel free to jump in. Okay, some parents as well, here for your children. Really appreciate that. Thank you for joining us. Now, to start with, you're probably wondering what the activity list even is. So I'll just be taking you through that. But just to give you an idea of basically what this session is going to entail and whether it is pertinent for you, we're going to be talking about what the activity list is, how it really helps your application, how it contributes to the character that you are putting forth to the admissions officer. We're going to be talking about how best to approach it, what are some tried and trusted methods of writing it well, and then how to actually stand out even within something as concise as the activity list, right? And finally, I'm going to be giving you some action items that you can best enforce while writing your activity list, so that you can start writing the best possible list that you can to get you into college. Now, as I mentioned, the activity list is, in my opinion, one of the most chronically underutilized aspects of the Common App application. Some of you might even be confused after looking at the Common App and thinking, Viha, there's not really any list per se. What are you talking about? So on the Common App website, under the Common App section itself, there is a tab called Activities, which will ask you to fill in 10 different a maximum of 10 different activities that you have participated in from grade 9 onwards. So basically, through your 4 years of high school, that's grade 9, 10, 11, and 12, things that you have done before this, unless they are still being carried on through these years, are not directly pertinent. So say you won nationals for chess in 8th grade, that's not really something you can put down on your activity list unless you have nothing at all in your last 4 years, because those are not years that are pertinent to your college application, right? So it only pertains to the last 4 years of your schooling, unless, of course, you have been doing something since a really young age and are continuing to do it through your last 4 years. So that is the only exception to that rule. Now, the challenge on writing a good activity list is because it is very, very binary in nature. You have to select certain options from a limited list, and you then have to present the activity through a very, very limited character count. So this is a character count that essentially gives you only 50 characters to describe your position in the company, 150 characters to actually describe what the company does, and 250 characters to actually put forward the work that you did there. Now, as most of you are probably aware, this does not total more than about 40 to 60 words at the 250 character limit, right? If you're lucky. So it is very, very limited in nature. So the way that you put it forward is of utmost importance. Is this clear? Is there any questions or kind of confusion on what the activity list itself is? Okay, great. Let's move forward. Now, when you think about the activity list, it's essentially your brag sheet while not talking about your academics or your academic related awards per se, right? So this is not the place where you're going to say, I got a 95 plus. It's not going to be somewhere where you say, I topped the grade for a solid year, because there is a different section on the Common App that does that. But what you want to do here essentially is talk about three main kinds of activities. The first would be your academic pursuits, right? So this is anything that you've done to take your interest in your major outside the classroom. So this can be internships to do with your major selection. It can be research papers. This can be maybe an online course to do with a niche aspect of a major that you're very passionate about, right? So they basically want to see that you have taken this interest that you are claiming you want to study at the university, and you are taking it to the next level. You're pushing the boundary of what you are essentially being given within the classroom to expand beyond that and get actual professional world, real world experience. Now, this is extremely pivotal, especially with more research-oriented universities, because they believe that everybody within the classroom has obviously the exact same curriculum. They have the exact same access to resources, right? And the US is very, very big on curiosity, on initiative, and on taking the first step towards your own dreams. So they would want to see that you are actually willing to push your own interests outside the classroom, that you are going out there, meeting professionals in the field, trying to get some real work experience, even if you're just in grade 9, or that you are actually, if it's something more research based, looking up topics that interest you and writing actual professional research on the topics that interest you. That's a question. Sorry, let me just check. Okay, great. So somebody has said that I am freezing every couple of seconds. Is this a problem that other people are facing as well? Okay, I'm so sorry, Shanu, but I think it might be an issue with your network because it does not seem to be happening for anyone else. Okay, now somebody has said that, Gurusagar, you said you don't know what to write in your 10th slot for the list. I will get to that shortly. And Nisha, you have said that how does a 9th or 10th grader write a research paper? Now, that is a really fabulous question. And the answer to that is very simply a 9th to 10th grader will not write a research paper, right? Now, what they can do is understand how actual research is conducted. Now, qualitative research or even quantifiable research, obviously, they're both art forms, but people don't really realize that even qualitative research is an art form, how to conduct an interview or how to even read another research paper to best understand the points that pertain to yours. So if you're as young as being in the 9th or 10th grade, what you can start doing is preparing to actually write a research paper by the time you enter 11th and 10th grade. And the way you can do this is through a combination of maybe a research course on, I think there's a fabulous one on Udemy. I believe Coursera does not have one at the moment, but Udemy definitely has a very good one on understanding how to conduct research. And the other things that I would recommend are just picking up a book on how to do research and reading through it. And of course, familiarizing yourself with websites such as PubMed or Sci-Hub and actually reading research papers in fields that interest you, so that by the time you're in 11th or 12th grade, the concept is not completely foreign and you're not dealing with something absolutely new and baffling, right? You understand how research is conducted and you know pretty much what the research that you want to do is. Because I can promise you the best research papers are not the ones written by professionals. They are ones written by people who are passionate about the subjects that they're writing about. So say that you are a pre-med student who is very, very passionate about cardiac health, right? And say you've grown up in this generation that has essentially gone through high school during the COVID period. Maybe you want to study how COVID has affected cardiac health through this period, right? How best to do that if not to read papers over these years to see what people are actually reporting a change in symptoms or maybe different trends in the kinds of heart attacks that are happening, right? So exposing yourself to the process and getting ready essentially to put yourself in that position so that by 11th grade you can write a research paper and by 12th grade you can push it to get published. Okay, Nisha, I hope that answers your question. How will the research paper help us? An excellent question, Jival. The fact is that a research paper is actually possibly one of the most valued additions you could have on your activity list, right? Because it shows a student with three main qualities: somebody who is academically bent, somebody who is not afraid to take on topics on their own without guidance from school, and somebody who is willing and curious to actually explore. Now, a research paper, And because a lot of them actually directly can be published, it's a whole finished piece of work on a passion topic for you that essentially helps you put forth your opinion and your view in a very, very professional capacity. Right. Now, this is a topic that's very close to my heart because I have helped teach two courses on how to conduct research at Ashoka University when I worked as a teaching fellow. So it is something that I am very passionate about. Um, so I often help guide my students on how to write research papers, how best to even go about finding the topic that resonates with them. But I truly believe if you orient yourself and you dedicate yourself to properly understanding the process and properly trying to figure out your niche area or your passion, it is something that every single student can undertake should they wish to. And there's certain universities, like for instance, even like say an NYU, they would really place a lot of value on something like a research paper. Right? Could I please share the link of the Udemy course? I can do that after this session. I'll be putting up my number and my email ID. So please just drop me a message and I will share the course with you. Yeah, no, Nisha, the one that I recall is on Udemy. I do believe there's a really good book or two out there. I'm forgetting the author's name. Again, I'll be putting up my contact information at the end. Just feel free to message me and I will happily send you the link. Or if you would, of course, like me to guide you on the process of getting your research paper underway, we could have a meeting to even help you decide the topic or something like that. Where can you find pre-made research papers so that you have an idea of how exactly they look? So this is where, right, this is where you are going to need to really explore websites such as PubMed or Sci-Hub, because these are places which are essentially just intellectual databases. So these have research papers on literally every topic that you would be very, very interested in looking at. Also, I am conducting a webinar on how to do research in a couple of weeks with Mindler. So if this is something that interests you, please tune in for that, because over there we'll be sharing all these resources in much more detail and going over everything. So yeah. Where can these be? Guys, lots of questions about research papers. 1 second. Can you just give some tips to be more clear about our spike? Can you explain by what you mean by your spike? I'm not sure I understand that question. I'm sorry. Where can these be published? There's several places that they can be published in, and this is very, very specific to different subjects, right? So you would not be publishing a psychology research paper in the same place you would be publishing an econ research paper. And then again, the subtopic within that would be niches again. But of course, it's not like there aren't places to publish these. So every single niche that you have would be publishable somewhere. I don't have a ready database to kind of rattle off, but if you are writing one, of course, there is lots of guidance on how to go about that. Can I share those as the end as well? Again, guys, just contact me if you require anything specific and I will be helping you figure that out. Can we just move past research papers at the moment? Because we do have a webinar on this in a couple of weeks. And I have a lot of information to get through right now. Gursagar, if you want to just clarify about what you meant about your spike, I'll be happy to answer that in a bit. There's also some in the Q&A tab. Of course, somebody said, can we mention our website that we have made in our activity list? Absolutely. Something like a website is a very good extracurricular, right? Because it's showing initiative again. It's showing the kind of work that you've put out there, and it's a tangible, actual website that you could visit. It would be hard to actually link in your website in the activity list because links don't really work that well from there. So where you would want to put that is in your additional information essay, but you would want to list it as one of your activities. Okay, great. I think I got all the questions at the moment. Yeah, let's just move on, right? So the first were academic related activities, such as the ones we've just discussed. Now, the second that you want to talk about are some passion the US is very, very big on, which is sort of it's almost dichotomous because they want to see a lot of variety in your list. They want to see that you are somebody who explores a lot of things, you try out a lot of new things, but they also want to see that you have been very consistent in your attempts, right? So they love to see one or two passion-based activities that you have consistently been putting in effort in for several years. So this is where you would likely talk about, you know, if you've been dancing since a very young age, even if just for fun, of course, if you've been doing it professionally, that is something that is super great. So that's really just specific to you. Then, of course, there's something like music. If you're a grade 4 or grade 7, it doesn't really matter. They just want to see that you have consistently put in effort and energy into something that you are very passionate about. Now, this does not, of course, have to be something arts-based. So while music, dance, acting, these are very common ones, it's not something that's necessary, right? So you could even have something like art or photography. You could have something like martial arts. You could have something, any sports related activity, right? That you've been playing since a younger age. And if you have picked it up recently, have you at least been consistent with your time and effort that has gone into it? So that is the second type of activity that you would definitely want to mention. The third type is your social work. Now, a lot of, this is sort of, I would say there are some different opinions on this, because some universities believe that you're just chasing after social labels to try to sound like you're trying to do good work without actually putting in that kind of effort, right? They think it's just a very quick token. And I'm sure you all have also seen that either with your seniors at school or somewhere else, where they're just running around trying to get like those volunteering certificates. Doesn't actually make it that believable or actually that significant. So when you're talking about social work, unless it's something that you're genuinely passionate about or something that you're genuinely going to put time and effort into, I would honestly advise against just throwing it in there, because that makes you look a little bit shallow. It makes you look a little insincere, right? Because what you've got to understand is that the activity list, you don't get to speak about it, right? It simply exists on its own. Likely the person that is reading it is not the same person reading your Common App essay or your additional information essay or anything else. All they get to see of you is your name and this one list of activities. So they are not going to take the time to figure out whether or not you are a genuine person. So you need to be able to put that across through the work you do yourself. So if you are taking on social work of any kind, it has to be something that you're genuinely super passionate about and something that you can be sincere about, and not just something that you attach your name to in the hopes of looking better, because I promise you, to a certain extent, that's going to backfire. Um, some more questions. Okay, lots of everybody wanting to know if their stuff works. Running an NGO, does that look good on a CV? Absolutely. If you're directly running an NGO, that means that you have put in the time and effort into actually starting an NGO, right? It doesn't mean that you have simply gone there to get some volunteering certificate. So that is something that would look really, really good. And something that I'm going to get to in a little while is you want to show numbers. You want to show how your NGO is actually impacting people, the kind of good it's doing. So I'll get to that in a little bit more detail very shortly. Right? Could I list my skills in IT? Yes, of course, because you could put it down as different achievements, right? So maybe if you've done any Python courses, if you've done Harvard's that entire code package, these are things that you could put down as things that you have done. And in the description, you would say learned and mastered blah, blah skills to do with coding or AI or whatever, right? Should I put my participation and winning in hackathon in awards section or activities section? This is going to come into your activities, because usually the awards section tends to be for more academic awards. However, it depends on how the exact nature of the award. But I don't see why it can't go into your activities section. If I made a temperature and weather sensor, can that be included? Yeah, that's great work, right? They love nothing more than innovation. Like I said, any passion-based activity carries a lot of weightage for them. And I'm guessing your academic passions probably maybe align with that as well. So if you've made something like a temperature and weather sensor, that would be super, super cool. You could talk a little bit about your process of making it, how many people are using it, the kind of work that it's doing, right? I'm so sorry. Sanjay, I'm not understanding your question too well. Uh, could you just rephrase that, please? I'm not really understanding what you're asking. Um, okay, just rephrase that. No problem. Uh, any more? Activities related to architecture, that would be really anything to do with design would look really good if you manage to intern with any architects that you know. If you can write maybe reports on different architectural styles that you have visited and different flaws or benefits you see of them, there's a lot that can be done there. If you'd like to discuss this in detail, feel free to contact me after this. Can we also get a webinar for cracking lists for other countries such as Canada, etc.? Canada does not technically have an activity list. So the beauty of the US application system is that it's so huge that if you cover this, literally you are actually covering understanding how to apply to every other country because it is the biggest, right? It's kind of like an umbrella. The only other application which is as diverse and takes in as many factors is honestly the Ashoka application here in India. So if you would like a seminar on Ashoka, we'd be really happy to conduct that to you. Yeah, so I think if you just really follow the same rules for any extracurricular based questions in Canada, you'll be fine. What is Common App Essay? So the Common App Essay is the personal statement that goes out to all universities when you apply. In the US, it's kind of like the heart and soul of your application. It is the main hook from which you hope that universities are going to pay attention to you, they're going to talk to you, right? So that is there. Is a sports athletic activity compulsory for getting a crucial activity list? Absolutely not, right? No specific domain is going to make or break your activity list. It's about putting forth a coherent character. From these 10 activities, I should be able to understand what kind of a person you are. That is essentially the purpose of the activity list. So obviously not everybody's going to have sports, just the way not everybody's going to have art, and not everybody's going to have MUN, and not everybody's going to have dance. So it really just depends on you as a person. And honestly, they want to see some amount of link between all 10. Not that they all are exactly the same activity, but it should look like the same person has done all 10, which is why I'm very, very against actually faking any of these. Can we put on our financial planning and marketing skills? If you have used them in any way that is constructive, if you've helped out your family with them, anything like that, absolutely, yeah. There's no reason you can't. Yeah, I also think I was just going to say the same thing. I do feel like there are too many questions. I didn't anticipate these many. So I am going to first get through all the content now, and then I'm going to address questions. Feel free to keep dropping them by because I feel like otherwise you'll forget as well if you want to write them down. But I am going to now reserve taking questions till the end because it's becoming a little too specific. Okay, yes. So basically, just to recap, what the kinds of things you want to show in your activity list, that's number one, academic-based activities, anything that shows basically an interest in academic subjects outside the classroom. Number two is passion or innovation-based activities, anything that showcases your love for anything in your life at all. This can be from taking care of stray dogs to basically inventing a mini working radio, right? Whatever is your specific passion. And the third, if it is pertinent, is any kind of social work that is very, very relevant to something that you are sincere about and something you are passionate about. And what's important is that they can also see that you aren't afraid to actually take bigger steps or you aren't afraid to take a leap, right? Because they don't want to see that you are completely boxing yourself in or shutting yourself down with the kind of decisions that you make. So in case that seems like a lot of information and that seems like a lot that you have to cover to get through your activity list, don't let it get you down because I can promise you we've all done things that we don't even count as activities that would look good on your activity list. And we're going to understand how to approach that really shortly. Now, when we talk about approaching the list, one of the main questions I always get is, should I go for consistency or should I go for variety? Right? So this means that if I'm applying for coding, do I want all 10 of my activities to do with coding or do I want something to mix it up? Now, the answer to that is you always want to mix it up, right? The reason they ask for 10 distinct activities is so that you can put as much variety in there as possible. The whole system in the US, as I'm sure many of you are aware, is the liberal arts system of education, which thrives off of basically an interdisciplinary approach to education, wherein you can study as many things as possible while also keeping your passions for things like the arts or music or writing or whatever else specifically interests you alive. So they do want to see a good amount of variety, but of course, it does not need to be polar opposite, right? That is something that people get very confused about. Like somebody just said, do I have to have sports? You don't have to have anything. You simply have to show that you are somebody who has participated in a good variety of things, and that you're not afraid, like I said, to actually explore new things, and you're not constantly boxing yourself in. So while you do want to go for variety, you also don't want to make it very, very obvious that you're simply making things up, right? That you are simply just coming up with things that are going to make you sound like you're trying a lot of new things, because that is honestly going to make very easy to read through. So you have to be very, very honest about the kind of work you're doing, and you have to just portray it in a good way. The other thing is, I hear a lot from my students is, oh, the admissions officer isn't going to care that I did this. They're not going to care that I did that. And a lot of the times, those are excellent activities, right? So a lot of the times people will think that, oh, I just did this silly little community play for the kids in my neighborhood, and it didn't actually have any like bigger cultural significance. And that's fine, because it's something that it's a community initiative, right? It got everybody involved. It was a celebration of theater. It was a celebration of the arts, without directly having to be groundbreaking or earth shattering, right? They're not looking for you to change the world. They're just seeing that you are somebody that would be a good fit to their university. And now comes the problem when we don't really have much to say in our activity list. So a lot of the time, some very simple things that we do can also look really, really good in our activity list. For instance, I had a student last year who had not honestly done that much in terms of activities, but she had looked after the chicken coop in her school, right? And she didn't think much of it, but we wrote it really beautifully, talking about her interest in animal husbandry and talking about her passion for raising, antibiotic and hormone-free chickens. And that actually became a really interesting point during some of her interviews that she managed to talk about. So it's really about finding things in your life and celebrating them. And that's why I'm saying the more genuinely passionate you are about it, the better it'll seem, because admissions officers, the second they talk to you, and a lot of the times when they read your work, they can tell when you're being genuine or not. So you do want to definitely put things forward that you are genuinely passionate about, but the only thing is to write them really, really well. So had she just written, I looked after chickens in my school, it probably wouldn't have gone down that well. But because we related it to her interest and passion for animal husbandry, because we put it down as an initiative to try to raise healthy chickens that were free of any kind of residue, it did carry different weightage. Right? Does that make sense? You can just leave a thumbs up or a heart if it does. If you're confused, just raise your hand. Hopefully that is making a certain amount of sense to you. Fabulous. Okay. So now we move on to how do you actually write your activities, right? Now, this is where things become problematic, because as I mentioned right at the start, there's a very, very limited character count. You just have 50 characters for writing your designation, 150 characters for writing, 100 characters for writing your organization, and 250 characters for describing what your role there actually was. So there's a couple of key things we can keep in mind to make sure that we put forth the information as best we can, right? The first and most crucial thing that you want to do is be quantifiable in your actions and results, right? So a lot of the times when we're talking about things, unfortunately, we write exactly the way we talk. So if you ask me how this event went, and I said that, oh yeah, a lot of people, participated and a lot of people attended it, and I got a good number of questions, that does not give you the same impression as me saying, yeah, there were 45 participants and over 30 questions answered, right? That gives you a more in-depth understanding of the kind of work that went down. And it doesn't have to be the most impressive numbers in the world. It doesn't have to be the largest numbers. It just has to give an actual idea of the kind of work that went done. So for example, instead of saying something like several people attended the event I organized, also always refrain from saying I or me. Talk about things in the passive third person, right? So do not insert yourself into things like your resume or your activity list, because it looks extremely unprofessional. So instead of saying something like that, if you write the event was attended by 250 guests, 5 panelists, and 3 organizations, that gives a very professional breakdown of the kind of work that went down and helps people visualize what kind of event it was, right? Then the next thing is to be as specific as possible. Now, again, a lot of the times when we talk about the work we do, because we're not really used to talking about ourselves, we're not really used to being proud of the work we do, I would say we talk about them really, really, I would say insipidly. So a lot of the times people will just, in the organization they work for, they will just write art and they'll write something like created art pieces and organized school club, when the same thing could be written as founders art honors society, organized and ran meetings, set up field trips, brainstormed and created group art activities, and wrote and sent newsletters to members. Right now, these are all, as you can see, these are not complete sentences, right? They're simply points. But the beauty of the activity list is because it's not an essay, you can afford to write in short, to the point points without actually having to complete each essay separately. So there's no real pressure to write it really beautifully. That's not there here. The third thing would be that every single detail really counts, right? So do not assume anything is known by the person reading your activity list. So a lot of the times when we're writing, we just assume that people know what certain positions entail, what certain work entails. Don't take any of that for granted. So instead of saying, I interned as a junior assistant, you can say you assisted supervisors, filed paperwork, made phone calls to donors or to investors, prepared facilities for training programs by helping with class planning or anything else, right? Now, usually when you'd say intern as a junior assistant, you would assume something like paperwork being filed and phone calls being made is too mundane to actually mention, but that is absolutely not the case. So please make sure that you get down every little detail of the work that you've done. But of course, if you're running into too many sentences and you're crossing that character count, that is where you start prioritizing which sentences you actually want to keep in, right? And then you can start grouping things together as well. This is actually something we really help our students with at Educis, because writing an activity list is super challenging because of the character count. So a lot of the times it's very hard to kind of group things together if you haven't done this professionally for a while. It's actually a lot more challenging than it sounds. But honestly, my advice would just be that to try to put things as succinctly together while also not understating their importance, right? And the most important thing is to always showcase yourself in a positive light. A lot of us end up reflecting some of the struggles and a lot of the hardships that we've been through when we talk about the work that we've done, but that isn't necessary at all. And often it can lead to a bit of a mood dampener for the person reading your application. Okay, now how to stand out. Now you're probably thinking, okay, it's a list. I can't really stand out per se. There's not much I can do to sound like a star student. Now, this is absolutely incorrect. There is so much that you can do to actually make an activity list honestly one of the central points of your application by sounding not only really, really well versed in the things that you've done, but also making sure that you sound like somebody who has done something that nobody else has even thought of doing, right? And the first and most important thing that you need to do when you're doing this is to write action points, right? A lot of us simply put down things we've done as very, very passive or very, very uninvolved, right? As much ownership of the things that you've done and show as much initiative that you can through the actions that you've made. And another trick that I have that I personally use a lot is to show that you're a jack of all trades and at least a master of some of them, right? Because you want to show that variety, you want to show that consistency of effort. So you do definitely want to show that you are exceptionally good at a few things. And you also want to show that you are medium good at a few other things because you're not afraid to push yourself outside your comfort zone or outside your safe box, right? And now when it comes to actually writing the list, we're simply going to follow 4 simple steps. We're going to go from the most to the least important activity. So say you have started your own company, that is going to be your first point, and you've written a book, that's going to be your second point, while your 10th point is going to be something like took an online course on Coursera in this subject that interests me. Right. So you can see the difference in the kind of activities. Nobody expects all 10 of them to be, jaw-dropping activities. They just need to see that kind of variety, like I mentioned. And very honestly, some admissions officers are going to read simply the first 2 to 3 activities and then skip. So you want to catch hold of their attention in those first 2 to 3, right? As I mentioned, write in points so that you can cover as much information as possible. Don't waste your character count on something like the, she, he. That's not necessary. Just write exactly what you did at each point, right? Actions, as I mentioned. Um, Step number 3, utilize the character count for all it's worth. The character count is so limited that a lot of people honestly don't use all of it. They simply put down the shortest version of what they're trying to say and then they leave, which is also not a good way to approach it. You need to utilize as much of that character count as you genuinely can without forcing yourself, because you definitely can say more in 250 characters than as opposed to if you had just utilized 100 characters of it. So don't be afraid of how limited it is. Definitely write a little bit generously there. I would say it's the only part that lets you write a little bit. So don't be afraid to use all of it. And finally, don't be afraid to talk yourself up, right? Don't worry if you think you sound braggy anywhere. There's somebody who's going to be out there who has done less the amount of work that you have, and will be talking about it at least 5 to 10 times greater than whatever you've done. So make sure that that is something you are careful about because we autocorrect ourselves so much. So just make sure that you're not doing that. Two people have raised their hand. Yes, Dr. Kiran, you'd like to say something? Could you just we're actually right towards the end of the presentation, so I'll just take all comments at the end. Okay. So now I want you all to think about all the things that I've shared with you today and start thinking about how you can actually write a really good activity list, what those 10 activities in your life are that really stand out to you. Obviously, say you have 15 activities, that would be a great place to start clubbing some of them together. So say 3 of them are to do with working at different NGOs, you might want to simply put them down as NGO work, mention the different NGOs and talk about the work you did for them within one point instead of splitting that up, right? And now let's just take a look at what this activity list actually looks like, right? Okay, so now this is not the Common App. Obviously, this is simply a template that I have created so that you can get a mock-up of what it looks like while not actually being on the Common App, because on the Common App, every question is separate, so it's a little confusing to look at. So as I mentioned, you have binaries, right? So even for your activity type, you have to choose which type of activity it is. Now, these are quite comprehensive options, though obviously it can still be a little hard to pick where you want to fit what you're talking about, right? So you have everything from academic to art to career to culture, dance, family responsibilities is a really interesting one. That's whether you've taken care of a sick relative, if you've, had to step up for your family and get a job, anything like that. Internships, journalism, LGBT related work, if you've done anything for sexuality, for gender, etc. Music in the instrumental form, music in the vocal form, research, science or math, social justice. And then there's also just other collaborative activity, right? Now, this can get a little bit confusing sometimes because say you have written a research paper on the development of I don't know, like how carbon emissions are being, disposed. So would that come under science or math, or would that come under research? So this is where you'd want to choose. Do you have perhaps another activity that comes under research? Then it'll be a good place to change it up and go for science or math, right? Or maybe you simply want to think about which one would be more pertinent to your dream schools that you're hoping will read this list. Okay, then over here you have 50 characters to write your leadership position or your description. Again, this is a good place to try to use it a little bit more than it will allow you to. So instead of simply saying intern, you might want to write intern and assistant to whomsoever you actually assisted, right? Then there's the organization name, which is max 100 characters. So over here, you would want to talk about basically the organization. And again, a great way to utilize these 100 characters would be to write a little bit about what the organization does so that you don't have to explain it over here and waste your characters. So over here, instead of simply saying Zuban, for instance, you could write Zuban, comma, a feminist publishing house, right? And that gives you pretty much a lot more information than you had earlier. Then, of course, you have describing the actual activity. I'm so sorry. I think I said 250 characters. It's 150 characters, right? So it's very limited in nature. Here, you would write down what you did in points. So say you are an intern at Zuban, you would write something like proofread manuscripts, made preliminary edits, called publishers, called panelists, whatever you've done in short points, right? And now over here is the part of the list that I haven't really had a chance to discuss with you. And this is also in a binary, so it's not actually confusing to do, but there are some rules that you have to follow. So for participation grade levels, it'll give you the options of 9, 10, 11, 12, and you can tick as many grades as which you participated in the activity in, right? So if you participated in it from 10th to 12th, then you would tick 10, 11, and 12, right? Simple enough. Timing of participation, this would be during the school year or during the school break, or whether it was all year around, right? Then you need to give a rough estimate of how many hours per week you spend on it. It's always better to keep this slightly on the higher side. You don't want to write 1 hour or 2 hours because that looks like you're not too dedicated to what you're doing. Then weeks spent per year, it's better to be honest about this because they are going to be able to check, right? And finally, the most important panel in this section of the activity list, which is I intend to participate in a similar activity in college. And the honest answer here does not really matter because you should usually just say yes. Unless, of course, it is something extremely school specific, like was in, I don't know, something that only your school offered. Unless there's no counterpart in the university that you could take forward, you do usually want to say yes, because otherwise it just kind of looks like you put in all that effort for no real reason, right? Great. So now that, as I mentioned, is my email address. That is my phone number. If you need to get in touch with me, if you're interested in working with us at Educis, we help you with profile building so that you can actually have those 10 incredible activities at the end of the year, along with absolute other end-to-end application support, right? Now I'm going to start taking a look at the chat and at the questions. Okay, some people are asking for it to be shared. If I'm not mistaken, Ritik, I think Mindler will be sending a reminder email with a recording of the session. I think that will be happening, so don't worry. Oh, somebody has said that you could only see the top half of the PPT. Was this happening for everyone? Is this an issue? Can you please let me know? Let's get to the questions. Can we mention our involvement in the student government in our activity list? Absolutely, that will come under a leadership activity. It's a really, really good one to have. What kind of skills and achievements should I have to get accepted? Honestly, this just depends on what you want to get accepted for and what kinds of skills and achievements you have and what your intended major are. So this is a very personalized question. I'd be happy to discuss it with you over call later. Do gap years negatively affect your application? What would be the max amount of time you can take comfortably without giving a bad look to your profile? I would say a gap year is standardly 1 year. And definitely if it is over that time period, it does raise a few eyebrows because a gap year is pretty much a standardized thing. So going above or below it is a little odd. I mean, below is still excusable, but above it is a little odd. But honestly, it can't negatively affect your application as long as you're showing how you're utilizing your gap year, right? So if you are spending your time very wisely, if you have achieved certain things you hadn't before that, that really does look good, in fact, on your profile. So don't be afraid. If you need to take a gap year, take it, but don't just sit around and do nothing during it. Is getting a good SAT score or writing the SAT exam important to get a good scholarship? This again depends completely on the program that you're going for and the universities you're looking at, right? A lot of schools are test optional now, so that is not a requirement by any way or viewpoint, but it of course does help your application. So that would depend on your specific profile. Um, yeah, you're gonna have to tell me what you do for skills. What do I write for the organization name? This would be where you worked. So say you were part of the student government, so you would write the organization name would be your school. If you did an internship, it would be the company you interned with. If it's something you've done yourself, you would just write self, right? So yeah. Please send the link to the template in the chat. I'm so sorry. This is a template I've created just for my students. So if you are happy to work with us, I'd be more than happy to take you through it because it gets a little messy otherwise. Can like simple habits like cycling and working out in the gym be listed? Yeah, if you have nothing else to talk about, they definitely can be listed. But again, like I mentioned, it depends on how you actually talk about them. right? So you want to talk about your passion for being in the gym or for working out as something transformative to your life, and maybe something that you have done something with beyond just a personal hobby or passion. But of course, it can be mentioned. There is no sort of um, prerogative not to do that. Does MIT prefer more research-related extracurriculars or like creative extras? This is a very good question. A lot of when it comes to the more technical universities, there definitely is a divide between those that are more research-based and those that are more creative. I would say for a place like MIT, definitely keep both. Like, firstly, MIT would be a dream for anyone. It's not a safety or a target university for anyone. So you would want to do as much as possible. So in the creative side of things, you would want to have at least spend some time creating codes of your own, creating websites of your own, maybe creating some kind of a database. And from the research side, you might have wanted to look into certain existing pieces of literature or work and seeing how you can take that forward yourself. Can you write watching anime in your activity list? As I did learn a little of Japanese language and culture from it. You would want to write this in a very, very different way. You would want to write actually learning Japanese, right? You would not want to talk about watching anime itself. So there are definitely ways to express your interest in a culture, but you would have to be careful in how you write it so that it doesn't simply look like watching TV, essentially. Do IVs pay a lot of importance to the activity list? Yes, they do. But of course, see, the activity list would come down the priority list then, right? I mean, if you're not making the academics and the SAT score to be considered by an Ivy League, they're not going to look at your activity list in any case. The thing is that everybody getting considered for an Ivy League is already going to be in that top 5 to 10% of academics. So then the differences start to come about through the activity list, right? If that makes sense. Should I write any exams such as IELTS? Yes. If you are applying to the US and you are not an American citizen, you have to write your IELTS. A lot of people think this is only for the UK. You absolutely have to do it for the US as well. And people say IELTS or TOEFL, IELTS. It's the more standard one. It's easier. So yeah. Does a high SAT score compensate for average marks in the final year of high school? What about scholarships in this situation? Very good question. Now, the thing about a SAT score is that it is there to kind of complement your academic scores. So say you've scored like a 50% in your academics, and then you go and you get a 1550 in your SAT score, they're not going to really be impressed by that. They're just going to be confused. There are certain universities out there that do put greater priority on your SAT score and would be willing to, I would use the word forgive a low academic score in that case, but you would still not be opening up the options that you would be opening up with a very high academic score, right? Working in NGOs is compulsory? Not at all. As I mentioned, nothing here is compulsory. These are just certain ideas and tips and tricks to get you started. Can I add my experience in business management and the time period to make my application to any university? Absolutely. Any kind of experience or work is absolutely relevant, right? I've heard MIT doesn't accept external students for masters in CS. Is this true? Would someone's application for masters be rejected if they apply for another country? I am not the masters expert on the team. I'm so sorry, you're going to have to ask someone else. But I have also heard this, so I'm not too sure. Can I include how I organize this kit in my activity list? But is not really pertaining to my course or major? Absolutely. As I said, right? They want to see that variety. They want to see that you've tried out new things. They want to see how well you've done. The key is to write it really, really well. Use those action points, use those keywords to try to make it sound like you have done a lot, even if it wasn't actually that much. Right? But to basically showcase your passion for a lot of different things and basically show your efforts and your attempts wherever possible. Do IGCSE, GCSE students who took English language need to write TOEFL or IELTS? Yes, they do. You do still need to write your IELTS. It's just safer. At the end of the day, you don't want to make all the other requirements to your dream university and get rejected because suddenly somebody decides you need the IELTS, and they can be very finicky about this. So please just write the IELTS, everyone. With more and more universities going test optional, will submitting a high SAT score with an average final year be of any use submitting? It'll definitely improve your chances, right? Think of your SAT as 20% of your application, max 30%. So at the end of the day, it can give you a plus 20 or 30%. It's not going to compensate for that overall 50 to 60% that is your academics, but it can give you that boost of a plus, right? And remember, if something is optional for you, there are going to be thousands of kids out there who are treating it like compulsory, and it is the purpose of their life to score that well. So if you're aiming for a top university, make sure you don't treat anything as optional. We can mention that we know 12 different languages, but not completely. Absolutely, you can, right? You can mention that you know 12 different languages, that you're linguistically bent, that you're trying out more things. That's a very impressive achievement actually to have on your activity list. I did the YSP science program at Shoga, so should I include it in the activity list? Yeah, that's a summer program. It's a really good one. It would make a really good addition. Is IELTS compulsory? Yes, everybody, please give your IELTS because most universities are going to ask for a proof of English proficiency and they are not going to accept your high school grades as proof. Okay? I have certain students who are American citizens who have also been asked to give IELTS, so please do not take it lightly at all. All right, that was a lot of questions. Are there any more questions? Otherwise, I will be ending this session. I hope that helped answer some of the thoughts you had on the activity list, some of the questions you were facing. I hope this session was useful for you in some way. Do US citizens have to take SAT or is it optional? No, no, no. Being a citizen does not affect your SAT at all. Like most in the US, in fact, people take SAT as a compulsion in high school most of the time. So definitely do give your SAT whether you if you want to, because that is going to be a completely separate thing on your application. It has nothing to do with your citizenship. The US citizens need to write IELTS. Likely not. Some cases they still do, but that is the one safe place where you can afford to not give your IELTS. Though certain universities want you to have resided in America for a certain number of years before they grant you that. So it's best to check with the universities you're interested in. Does Educis counsel for Germany as well? Yes, it absolutely does. We do. In fact, we have a Germany expert on the team. If you'd like to speak with them, I can arrange a meeting for you. As I mentioned, everyone, this is my name on my email address on the screen. That is my phone number. If you need to get in touch with me, please just message me saying that you did in fact attend this session, and I would be really happy to talk to you about whatever you need. Some more questions here. How do I put my passion project? It's best to just talk about it and all the different things you did about it, put it in the right category, I would say is the most important thing, but definitely showcase it without holding back. Um, anything else that I missed? 790 in math and a 590 in English. Is it a good score for a mid-tier university like ASU? How much would that total? I'm sorry, my math is so bad. So that's like a 1380, right? Yeah, it's definitely decent. It would work for universities like ASU and GSU. Yeah. Also, though, if you've gotten a 790 in math, you can always Sanjay, give your SAT again, focusing only on English and just improve your English score and then super score across the two SATs, right? Yeah. If I've learned French in my 6th and 7th grade and not pursued it, can I add it? Not really. No, sorry. May I know colleges which offer business data analytics in India apart from the US? You would need to take a meeting with us. That would be a pretty long conversation. Being part of the econ club counts, yes. Somebody has said, ma'am, please tell, what am I supposed to be telling? Have I missed a question? Yeah, I think that was for the French question. Yeah, that's my answer to that. Okay. Do universities need second languages? No, they do not in the US. They absolutely do not. Don't worry about that. Is passion project a very important factor? Yes, it usually is because it really helps them know you specifically, right? You become the student with that passion project. Obviously, if you don't have it, it's no real big deal. But if you are in a year that is not 12th and you have the time to start working on a passion project, I would really push you to do so. And how do you plan it? You would need to take some time to properly think about it. We help, of course, with planning passion projects from end to end. So please make an appointment with us and get in touch, and we'll be happy to guide you through it. Okay. I'm now just seeing questions that I've already answered. So I'm going to be closing this. Thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully this answered some of your questions. That's my email address and my phone number on the screen. Please, please do get in touch if you do have anything you'd like to discuss, if you'd maybe want to work with Educis, or if you'd like our guidance in any way. Thank you. Have a lovely day. And yeah, thanks for being here today. Okay, goodbye.